We stir to life in the promise of a new Asian dawn. Temple bells toll, levers flicker, engines roar awake. From the swim of everyday life in Tashkent to lush Pacific atolls, Asia has been at the heart of the fight back against an invisible enemy. COVID-19 has radically altered our outlook on life. It has left us weakened, yet resilient, isolated, yet together. From the outset of the pandemic, ADB has played a key role across borders, responding to this unprecedented moment in time with agility and partnership. Today, our $9 billion vaccine initiative is saving lives and getting people back to work, helping economies build their capacity to recover. From north to south and east to west, we might all be on the same hopeful path to a brighter future, but the reality is we don't exist under the same sky. Over 1.2 billion working Asians still struggle on less than $3 a day, and it is the poor who will continue to be the most impacted by the virus. This is why our mission is clearer than ever: to remain focused on the needs of women, low-wage workers, and small and medium enterprises, whilst finding enduring solutions at the heart of the climate crisis. There is no denying our lives might have felt beyond our control, but this has also been a time for the best of us: educators, healthcare frontliners, delivery drivers, and ordinary citizens, each demonstrating selfless service and leadership in response to extraordinary challenge. The truth is, hope can be found each day in the world around us. Abundance is golden bread rising in an oven. Freedom is laughter on the journey to school, or the joy of dancing with friends. Fulfillment is companionship in our old age as we contemplate the past and the present. So let us emerge from this traumatic chapter in human history as better governments, better organisations, and better people, each sharing a value system that bonds generations together like never before. After all, we are our resilience. We are enterprise. We are part of the human engine of growth, driving a continent forward as we rise to the promise of each new day. We are ADB.
The COVID-19 has had a very, very devastating impact on the health system in our developing member countries for a variety of reasons. First, the numbers of people that were sick that required healthcare was quite significant, and the health system could not just cope. We just did not have sufficient healthcare workers to take care of all of them. Second, the healthcare workers themselves got sick and had to be quarantined at home. And in some situations, the healthcare workers died, and it takes 20 years to produce a medical doctor. And that was really unfortunate. And three, the population was also afraid of going to the hospital. And so for people who had chronic illnesses that required healthcare, they were not able to go, and conditions worsened. So COVID-19 had a very, very negative impact on the health system in our DMCs. We saw this as a threat to the development gains that the region has achieved over the past 60 years. And so as a development bank, our priority was to support countries to ensure that they have sufficient resources to have a system in place to manage the pandemic. We provided significant financing, over $20 billion, to support our developing member countries. The money was used for supporting the health system, to provide stimulus package for people who had lost jobs because of restrictions, to provide healthcare for people who were sick. So countries were able to get sufficient resources to address the problem. The second thing that we did was to provide knowledge. This was a new disease and a pandemic that we did not have a history. And so it required a lot of learning and knowledge across developing member countries. So we engaged with experts from around the world, from around the region, from the developing member countries themselves, to engage in a conversation on how best to handle and address all the aspects of COVID. And then we had strategic partnership. We developed partnerships with many organizations, the World Health Organization, which is an organization with a lot of capacity in terms of how to deal with pandemics. We engage with UNICEF. We engage with academic institutions. We engage with some of the think tanks. We literally mobilized all the capacity that was required to be able to support developing member countries. There are several key priorities regarding vaccine deployment of the vaccination program. The first is to ensure that there is equity and transparency so that the vaccines are not captured by only the rich and the elite. The second one is to ensure that there's a good system of distribution of the vaccines, because they require cold chain. So how vaccines are going to be distributed, particularly in complex countries like Philippines, that's more than 7,000 islands, and Indonesia, more than 17,000 islands. Third is ensuring that we have sufficient healthcare workers and looking at what other workers can come and help healthcare workers, because many countries are vaccinating so many people that might overwhelm the health system. And lastly is putting an IT system in place to track the people that have been vaccinated, and if they have any what we call adverse events, meaning that some people, when they get vaccinated, they might get either pain at the site of injection, or they might get fever or slightly sicker. So the health system need to know if there's any complications arising from vaccination. It's critically important that our developing member countries either initiate or accelerate progress towards universal health coverage. If you look at the countries that perform better during this pandemic, these are countries that have invested in universal health coverage, whereby they have primary care facilities that have good trained staff and also have equipment that they're able to detect any infection at the very early stages before it starts to spread. So I think that investing in universal health coverage is a top priority for ADB, and we are engaging our developing member countries to be able to accelerate progress towards the goal of ensuring that everybody is covered. There are 5 takeaways. The first one is strong political commitment and public trust. In countries where the leadership came out very strongly in support of COVID and engaged the public in terms of educating the public, those countries did much better than countries where the political leadership did not come out right at the beginning to address the problem. The second takeaway is preparedness. Countries that have had pandemics in the past were better prepared because they knew exactly what to do in the event of a pandemic, and therefore they were able to mobilize the whole government to be able to address the challenges that were arising because of the pandemic. The third takeaway is fast action. Some countries were slow in reacting, and they started reacting when many people were already infected, and it was very difficult at that time to contain the virus. But some countries acted very fast with very few cases, and they were able to lock down only the very small few communities where there was infection. And we have many examples in our region, the countries that were able to contain the pandemic. Fourth is basically follow the science. What does the science say? If there's a science that people should wear a mask, people should be quarantined, is basically implement what the science say. In many situations, there are countries that were not able to apply the knowledge that was required to be able to address the spread of the infection. And lastly is leveraging the private sector. The private sector is very significant, particularly in our region. How do you engage the private sector? They have health facilities. They have the technical know-how to do research and to come up with various interventions that are required. So a combination of public-private partnership to address the pandemic is very, very key to ensure that the country is better prepared, and also we are prepared for future pandemics.
The COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating impact on lives, well-being, and economies in Asia and the Pacific, along with the rest of the world. Since the beginning of the pandemic at the start of 2020, ADB has committed more than $17.5 billion to help its developing member countries address the impacts of COVID-19 and address vaccination needs, and has mobilized a further $12.5 billion in co-financing from partners. From the earliest stages, ADB offered technical assistance to address Asia and the Pacific's most pressing needs, including medical equipment and supplies, improving laboratories, and training frontline workers. To mitigate the immediate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, ADB committed $10.2 billion to support governments' counter-cyclical expenditure programs in 26 countries. Some $501.7 million has been helping private companies provide medical equipment and essential services. And ADB committed $3.2 billion for trade finance, supply chain finance, and microfinance programs. ADB is also providing crucial knowledge to help countries better tackle the pandemic and shape a greener recovery. This includes databases on policy measures, supply chains, and economic impacts. As the world kickstarts a sustainable recovery from COVID-19, ADB is delivering comprehensive support to meet Asia and the Pacific's vaccine needs. Through a $9 billion Asia-Pacific Vaccine Access Facility, or APVAX, announced in December 2020, ADB is providing funding for vaccine procurement, logistics, and distribution. The initiative also supports important investments to build capacity in vaccine delivery, community outreach, and surveillance. Throughout its COVID-19 response operations, ADB is working closely with partners, including other international financial institutions, bilateral institutions, and the UN system. ADB is adapting with agility to the region's changing circumstances, working together with its developing member countries to rebuild for a long-lasting recovery.
Asean is one of the world's most dynamic regions. Its 10 countries combined comprise the 5th largest economy in the world and are home to almost 650 million people. But climate change, pollution, and a lack of resilience are all impacting on growth.
ASEAN faces severe challenges. There's an urgent need for climate-resilient infrastructure investment.
To address some of these challenges, ADB's Southeast Asia Department set up the Innovation Hub in 2018 to create value-added solutions for the region. The hub has 2 critical objectives: accelerating green infrastructure development and catalyzing private capital from many sources.
In the pandemic context, we believe the Innovation Hub can play an even stronger role because the Southeast Asia region has got significant potential to bounce back, where green recovery is going to be very critical.
The Hub team is working on more than 20 projects to improve the way they are structured. One major success has been the ADB-supported Cambodia solar project. It has achieved the lowest power purchase tariff for a solar project in Southeast Asia.
The top 4 achievements of the Innovation Hub are bringing a real green and innovative finance focus in projects so that projects are better structured to leverage in capital from a number of sources, including the private sector. Number 2, creating perhaps the first green fund of its type in the world. This is the Asean Green Facility, regionally owned, managed by us. Very quick response to COVID with one of the first TAs, technical assistance projects post-COVID. And number 4, really bringing a focus in on accessing capital markets with bond issuances being improved and increased faster.
The Asean Catalytic Green Finance Facility was launched in 2019 at the Asean Finance Ministers meeting. In its first year, the facility has approved 3 projects, which will result in reduced greenhouse gas emissions of around 72,000 tonnes per year, along with significant other green benefits.
Where does the hub go from here? And I think it's very clear. It's helping our countries engineer a green recovery post the COVID pandemic. We are talking to 2 or 3 new partners to create these green recovery funds, which can help create a pipeline of projects which are bankable, scalable, and can attract funds from both public and private sectors so that the green recovery is hastened and accelerated.
I would say the question needs to be recharacterized. It is not how can the economic recovery be green, resilient, and inclusive, but how should it be? Because there is no option at this point in time. We do not have the luxury of time, nor that scale of financing that is needed to meet different crises with discrete openings and packages. We have to find investment opportunities that subserve multiple outcomes and allow us to meet the recovery targets, the economic goals of our countries, but also their long-term aspirations on how to address climate change, both mitigating it and adapting to different climate impacts. Let me give you some examples. For instance, the immediate objectives of economic recovery is creating jobs, creating new skills, and getting the small businesses back in action. So if we were to look at these objectives and see which are the opportunities that would also allow us to move towards a greener, low-carbon pathway, the immediate answers are related to renewable energy technologies and investment in renewable energy. They relate to opportunities in energy efficiency in our buildings, or also opportunities related to nature-based solutions, for instance, restoring our forest lands. And let me give you some statistics over here. 1 million invested in renewable energy will generate, according to an estimate, about 7.5 full-time equivalent jobs, whereas that 1 million invested in fossil fuels would generate just about 2.5 jobs. So you can see the immediate difference. In the short term, if we were to invest in renewable energy, we would be generating more jobs as compared to investing in fossil fuel power generation. The other example is restoring our forest lands, which forests are a good source of absorbing carbon dioxide. So if we restore forest lands, or if we restore our mangroves, again, a number that I'd like to quote over here from the US, about 150,000 jobs per year could be generated just by restoring forest land in the US. Similar modeling and exercises have been undertaken for Indonesia in its low carbon development initiative, which shows that Indonesia can maintain a 6% per annum annual growth while investing in opportunities related to renewable energy, while maintaining their forest lands. And also, these interventions and investments could create significant number of jobs. So the idea is that we look at the immediate short term for the recovery investments from the pandemic and marry with them the opportunities that are there for investing in green energy, for investing in forestry, for investing in energy efficiency. And that would also ensure that this short-term recovery investments are contributing to the long-term objectives of addressing climate change. So there is a confluence in the objectives through such green and resilient investments. The immediate answer to that is, of course, what we have experienced from the pandemic, the complete change in lifestyles and, the cleaner air that we were breathing. So that is in terms of the environmental outcomes. In terms of the social outcomes, the kind of social development programs that we have been traditionally investing in to enable the poor to deal with various crises, if we can give them some decent jobs, again, I go back to nature-based solutions, protecting our forests, managing our forests, or protecting our coastlines, which are not only productive from the point of view of creating jobs, but also give us satisfaction in terms of, the cleaner and healthier environments that we would be living in. So we have to look at livelihoods from the perspective, of course, of the poor, but also in terms of what sense of accomplishment it gives them for a larger cause that all of us, all the humanity is dealing with.
Violations of ADB's anti-corruption policy, whether by staff, consultants, contractors, or suppliers, are not tolerated. What are these violations? Corruption, like bribery and kickbacks. Fraud, or making false claims and forging records. Coercion, like blackmail and extortion. Collusion, by predetermining winners and bid rotation. Abuse, such as using equipment and supplies for non-ADB activities. Conflict of interest, like awarding contracts to family members or friends. And obstruction, like lying to investigators and destroying or concealing evidence. What are the consequences? Firms and individuals in violation of ADB's anti-corruption policy may be cautioned or reprimanded and pay restitution, but they may also face suspension or debarment. Those debarred cannot work with ADB for an imposed period, and they may also be debarred by other development banks. Loans or grants may be terminated, and misused funds must be repaid. And staff from executing agencies in violation of ADB's anti-corruption policy may be replaced. Corruption cannot be fought alone. ADB needs integrity champions like you. We are all responsible for implementing projects with integrity and due diligence. As integrity champions, we must be ready to scrutinize documents before signing them and report suspicious activities. We must be aware of project red flags and ensure accountability. Doing so will safeguard funds for the project and benefit those who need them the most. We must fight corruption on every level. By working together, we all win.
Welcome everyone to the Consultant Management System Seminar organized by the Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management Department of the Asian Development Bank. Before we start with the program proper, a few reminders. There will be 3 presentations today. At any time during these presentations, you may type in your questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be responded to accordingly, and some of these will be shared at the Q&A session later in the program. Now, we'd like to call on Mr. Rustam Abdukayumov, the Director of PPFD's Procurement Division 2, for his welcome remarks. Rustam, good afternoon.
Hello, thank you, Ivy, and Good day to all our participants. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this virtual business opportunities seminar, which is, by the way, quite different from all seminars we have conducted today. As you know, ADB is a multilateral development bank whose aim is to improve the livelihood of its developing member countries in the Asia and the Pacific. In 2020, we provided more than 200 million for different types of consulting services. We financed 3,700 contracts with individual consultants and about 200 contracts with the firms. And these includes contracts which are aimed at helping address COVID-related issues. So those of you who have prior experience working with ADB, you may remember that every year until 2019, ADB used to organize so-called business opportunities fairs in Manila. So this was quite a big event, and it was a good opportunity to network with ADB staff, learn about ADB business processes, and also have some exchanges of views with ADB colleagues. So last BOF, Business Opportunities Fair, we conducted in 2019 was attended by more than 1,000 participants. In 2020, of course, this COVID happened, and due to travel restrictions and other constraints, we could not host the Business Opportunities Fair. And instead, we have launched the Business Opportunities Outreach event by providing update on what ADB is doing in terms of new projects, new areas of interest, and also how ADB is trying to address COVID-related challenges. As you all know, situation this year is not very clear in terms of when everything will go back to normal. And therefore, we'll continue with the virtual format to conduct business opportunities seminars. For example, last year, we conducted about 34 seminars in different countries, meaning on average 3 events per month. And these seminars were organized based on requests from host country organizations. And of course, since they were requested by specific organizations, they covered specific topics which were of interest for that particular audiences. But based on questions we received during past business opportunity seminars, we understand that there is an increased interest from participants to learn about ADB's consultant management system. As you all know, all consultants who are interested to work with ADB, they first have to register in the CMS, and the entire selection process goes through CMS. So therefore, we thought it's useful to organize a dedicated seminar on the use of CMS, which is open to all interested participants from all over the globe. So we don't have any country restrictions or sector restrictions. Anyone is welcome to participate. And I'm quite happy to see that close to 400 participants are attending now. So let me introduce our team, because we'll have a quite interesting program, and I hope you'll find it useful. So first, it will be Stephen Gillard, who is the head of our consulting services unit. He will talk about policies and consultant recruitment processes. Then Galia Ismakova, our principal procurement specialist, will talk about CMS and its main features. Then we'll have a demo. And then we will have a Carl Lamibao, our consultant, who will go into details, more kind of technical details on how CMS works and how you should prepare proposals, how you have to submit your proposals, and so on. Then we will have Stefan Besadi, our senior procurement specialist, and Julian Dotzi, our procurement specialist, who will be helping us to facilitate your Q&As. So all the questions which you will send to us, we will try to answer. If it's not possible, then of course we'll try to prepare written answers and share with you later. And then finally, Stefan Besade will basically make the closing remarks. So I hope really that you will find today's presentations useful for you. First, to understand how to find business opportunities. Second, how to use CMS for preparing and submitting your proposals. And finally, also, I hope this information which you will receive today will help you to win contracts under ADB funded projects. So now I would like to hand over to our first presenter, Stephen Gillard. So Steve, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rustam. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Gillard, head of the Consultancy Services Unit. And today I'm going to give you an overview of consultancy at ADB and also show you where you can find more detailed information should you require it. We've got limited time, so I'm going to start by asking really the key question. Next slide, please, Apple. Why pursue ADB financed contracts? Well, as you may or may not be aware, ADB covers a really enormous geographical area, encompassing well-known huge markets like China and India. We also are present in some other interesting, developing, rapidly growing markets, such as the Pacific. We also have access to a very significant amount of funding for consultancy purposes. We have about $760 million of consultancy, which we awarded last year. We are a AAA rated financial institution according to all of the main ratings agencies, and we have more than 50 years track record, meaning that we are a reliable payer. You will get paid for your services should they be satisfactory. We also adhere to the highest standards of international procurement procedures. We regularly benchmark our procurement rules against other institutions. We recently updated our procurement policy in 2017, and I will say something about that later. We also have a strong commitment to fairness and transparency, which is enshrined in our principles. And we have a robust approach to anti-corruption with a dedicated department that looks into that and prevents fraud and the like. And we have a complaints procedure should you consider that you have been unfairly treated in a procurement matter. Unsuccessful consultants are also entitled to feedback on their proposals should they not win. So you should be able to take advantage of that should you wish to know how to do better in the future. Next slide, please. So ADB funds a variety of different projects. Traditionally, we are perhaps considered to be a public sector infrastructure funding bank, and this still holds true to some degree. However, private sector and public-private partnership are major growth areas for us and tend to grow year on year. And we fund our projects through a mixture of loans, which I think everyone understands. We also have grants where we make finances available on a non-reimbursable or non-repayment basis. We have our own financial resources, which are applied for various purposes, including staff consultancy. And we have a very substantial TA program or technical assistance program, which is funded by various bilateral and multilateral donors. From time to time, we also co-finance with other institutions, including, for instance, the World Bank, where we perhaps have some common goal and both contribute to the funding and use one institution or the other's procurement rules and procedures for the purpose of that procurement. Next slide, please. So where does the need for consultancy arise? Well, here's a depiction of a simplified project cycle. You can see at the top, we have the country partnership strategy, which is a very high level document, which I will mention a little bit later. This feeds into project level concept papers. Then we prepare projects through things like feasibility studies. We then have the funding approved, and then implementation occurs, which is where the majority of the consultancy opportunities arise. And then we evaluate, and the information that we learn from the evaluation feeds back into future projects. So the cycle is completed and ongoing. And the good news really is that consultancy opportunities arise at all phases of this cycle. Next slide, please. So here are some typical examples of consultancy opportunities that may derive from the cycle or may actually be outside of the cycle. We have knowledge products, which can include things like training, capacity building, etc. We have the project preparation work, such as feasibility studies, the implementation work like detailed design and supervision. And then outside of that, we supplement our own staff requirements with consultancy wherever there's a need. Next slide, please. So these opportunities we give to firms, and by firms, we of course mean commercial consultants, but we can also include other entities which perhaps don't consider themselves normally to be consultants, such as NGOs, universities. We also have opportunities for individual consultants. These can be private individuals, or they can be individuals who are recruited through companies, be they large international companies or small one-man band type operations. We also have opportunities for resource persons. Traditionally, they have been speakers and peer reviewers, but they can also now be technical experts. And the party that selects and contracts the consultant will largely depend on the funding source. So the EA will normally select and contract if the funding source is loan or grant, because in a sense the money is theirs to use. And when it's from TA funds, ADB will normally select and contract unless it elects to delegate some of that to the EA. And obviously for staff consultancy, it will always be ADB that does the selecting and contracting. Next slide, please. So this is how this all translates into figures. On the left, individuals, on the right, firms. You can see that for individuals, TA is dominant in terms of both value and number. But for firms, you can see that whilst there are also a lot of opportunities in technical assistance, that in terms of value, certainly, loan dominates with over 380 million of loan financing. So this is where the really huge contracts lie. Similarly, grant is also a very significant amount, considering there's only just over 100 contracts. Next slide, please. So in terms of where these funds are spent regionally, we have this slide. You can see that Southeast Asia is by far the biggest loan spend, with a lot of these enormous infrastructure projects currently underway. There's also lots of grant spend, in particular in Pacific. And it's also worth noting that asterisk at the bottom, where we talk about the multi-country idea, which is the others category, which can include both projects which transcend national boundaries, perhaps there's 2 or 3 countries involved, or ones which have non-regional issues, such as studies into things like regional gender issues, regional environmental issues, etc. Next slide, please. So focusing in now on technical assistance spend, the main country recipients are as follows. I think it's fair to say that there's no particular geographical pattern here. India, Mongolia, China, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, it seems to be fairly widely spread across our developing member countries. Next slide, please. And in terms of the sectors where the TA money is allocated, we can see it's as follows. We've got the agriculture and natural resources is top, with transport, energy, public sector all receiving large amounts of funding. And it's probably worth noting here, you can see at the bottom of the slide, we have here this reference to the operational procurement database. This is actually publicly available. If you're interested in this sort of data, you can actually dig down into it in more detail and find out more granular information for yourself, should you wish to. Next slide, please. So moving now to loan and grant funded consultancy, the sector spend is divided as follows. You can see that obviously the two enormous players are transport and water, which are obviously very key to ADB's portfolio, but other sectors are still attracting significant spend. Next slide, please. And the division by countries is here. You can see that, as I mentioned earlier, Philippines and Indonesia are the two major countries in terms of loan spend. You may have noticed some of these enormous infrastructure projects that are currently approved and which are getting a lot of publicity, certainly in the Philippines. But the money beyond the two big players there is fairly evenly spread around other countries. Next slide, please. So for loan and grant funded consultancy, typical opportunities are as follows. You can see that the highest value consultancy contracts which ADB funds are these large implementation projects which the EA selects and contracts. So these are things like construction supervision, detailed design. These projects can often run past 5 million, past 10 million US, even more. So these are really the enormous projects on our table. Moving on now to rules. Next slide, please. ADB currently has two rules frameworks, somewhat confusingly, but in some ways it works fine. We have the guidelines, which is applicable to projects which were approved before 1st of July 2017. And we have the policy, which applies to projects approved after that date. And both cover both executing agency and ADB administered procurement. And the idea with this procurement reform in 2017 was that we would modernize and try and move from a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to consultancy towards something which was more fit for purpose and more modern, and moving from a rules-based approach to a principle-based approach. Next slide, please. So here are those principles that I've just mentioned. Many, as you may work out if you think about it, are actually interlinked, and some are even actually in conflict with each other. For instance, it may be that you want something which is high quality, but you might have to compromise, for instance, on speed in order to acquire it or something like that. So our job really, in terms of designing our rules and also designing projects, is to think about it more in terms of these principles and work out what is right for the particular project. Some of these principles I've mentioned already, like fairness and transparency. The two new ones are highlighted at the bottom. They're new because they weren't specifically mentioned in the old guidelines: quality and value for money. I think value for money is probably the most interesting one personally, because it combines lots of other principles and lots of other considerations. Next slide, please. So what does this all mean for consultancy? Well, we're aiming to have faster consultant selection. So we are speeding up EA administered framework agreements and framework contracts, which I will mention later. We are simplifying a lot of our rules on things like shortlisting, which previously had lots and lots of rules which seem to offer very little value. So we've tried to scrap where it's not necessary. And we're putting more focus on working out how cost is incorporated into our projects. Next slide, please. So these are those methods. We have 6 methods in total. The first 3 are where cost is evaluated. The most common one, and the one which is ADB's preferred method really, is quality and cost-based selection, which you may hear abbreviated to QCBS often. And with QCBS, we have a combination of technical considerations and financial considerations, which are scored separately to achieve a consolidated score. And this is considered generally to be the best way to do things. We also have other methods where cost is considered, like fixed budget selection, where the best technical proposal, which is within budget, is awarded the contract. And then we have least cost selection, where the cheapest technically qualified firm wins the selection process. Next slide, please. And here's 3 methods where cost isn't tested. We have quality-based selection, where the evaluation is just on technical proposals. We have consultant qualification selection, where the selection is on the basis of expressions of interest only. And then we have direct contracting, also known as single source selection, where there is no competitive element to the selection. Next slide, please. So this is how this is broken down in terms of figures. Last year, we can see that QCBS was the main or the largest in terms of percentage method that was used, with about 44%. Then second, interestingly, was single source selection with 36. This is unusual. Usually we have far less single source selection and more competitive selection. I think most likely this was due to COVID, and I hope everyone appreciates that there were times last year where we had to deploy consultants very quickly for emergency reasons. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to say a few words about framework agreements and framework contracts, which we are in the process of introducing. Those of you who are familiar with other organizations, such as the EU institutions or EBRD, may already know about frameworks, but they're relatively new to ADB. And framework agreements and framework contracts both have the same sort of idea, which is that efficiency is improved by pre-selecting consultants ahead of the need. And we're actually having frameworks for both firms and individuals. Next slide, please. The terminology attached to frameworks varies from institution to institution, and sometimes you'll find that the terminology is the opposite to what we're using here. But anyway, the terminology that we're using is as follows. Framework contracts are used where one consultant will be selected to perform repeat services for us. So we'll issue them contracts under that framework umbrella. And the second one is framework agreement, where we will be selecting multiple consultants, and then we will be choosing from that pool of consultants when the need arises. And in either event, we will issue them a type of contract, which we call a call-off, which is the actual contract for those services. Next slide, please. So when may frameworks be appropriate? Well, it's important that there will be a critical mass of consultancy opportunities that are envisaged, which make it worthwhile establishing the framework. These should be able to be categorized sensibly into thematic and perhaps geographical restrictions, so that the frameworks are not too wide in scope. But generally speaking, the frameworks shouldn't be for work which is already known at the outset in terms of exactly where, when and what will be done. Otherwise, we would perhaps issue a different type of contract, such as a phased contract where all of the work could be issued in one go. They're really for where there's a bit of uncertainty down the line. Next slide, please. So obviously there's some pros and cons to using frameworks. The obvious pros are that there will be increased speed of deployment of consultants. And of course, it's good for consultants if you can get on the framework, because there's an assumption that you will be in pole position to obtain contracts of the type of the framework, should any be awarded. And the main con of frameworks is the amount of upfront effort that's required, both on our part to select them and on the consultant's part to prepare proposals, etc. Because ultimately there is no absolute guarantee of downstream work. So it could be that effort is expended unnecessarily. And if you're interested in framework, getting on frameworks, then these are advertised in the normal way through CSRN, which we'll explain a bit about later. So next slide, please. We're going to talk about how to find information. Next slide again, please. So there are really two main sources of information. One of them is going to be covered by my colleague Galia, which is CMS. I'm going to focus mainly on the ADB Business Center, which can be accessed from the link on this screen. This is a very useful site, really kind of goldmine of useful information that you might want to look at. Next slide, please. So really the information can be divided into what you could call long-term or strategic information, and also into short-term or perhaps tactical types of information. Next slide, please. So in terms of the sort of long-range information, probably the most interesting thing you might recall from my mentioning of the project cycle earlier is the country partnership strategies and country operations business plan. These are very high level documents which indicate what ADB and a particular country have agreed to do for a period of time. So you can really see potentially many years ahead what the pipeline is in a particular country. So these are very well worth scrutinizing, particularly if you have a particular focus on one country. Next slide, please. The next level down really from that is the procurement plan, which comes down to a project level. So this contains information on the pipeline of procurement anticipated for that particular project. And it is updated from time to time, so it's worth keeping an eye on this if you are following a particular project, in case something you're interested in gets moved forwards or backwards in time, or something new is added. Next slide, please. And this is the specific procurement notices. These are the notices that are available here and now that you could apply for today if you wished. So this is accessed in various ways. One is through CMS, another is through our website, and there's all sorts of filters here where you can look through the projects and find the ones you're interested in. I think I'll leave this to Galia. Next slide, please. We've also got some other opportunities which may not immediately be obvious. We're calling this one a hop-on opportunity, which is we have a list of shortlisted consultants. These are consultants that are currently bidding for projects, and they have passed the first hurdle and been shortlisted. So why might that be interesting to you? Well, it may be that you have skills or experience which could supplement their proposal. So you may wish to approach those firms and see if they would be interested in subcontracting you. ADB plays no part in this. Please don't come to us and ask us to recommend you to firms. It's not our role to formulate bids, but you, by all means, you can do your own research and approach those firms directly. Next slide, please. And another source of useful information is the already awarded contracts. This helps you know who your competitors are, but it also helps you know who you may be able to collaborate with in the future. So it's worth finding these firms and perhaps approaching them if you think there could be synergies. Okay, thank you. I think there's a bit of a delay with the internet, but anyway, so I'm going to give you a few pieces of tips and advice. I suggest that you always try and plan ahead. I think I've given you some information now which would be useful for those purposes. Try and build your brand name. Consider applying for subcontracting opportunities with other firms. Even if you only do a small piece of work for them, it will give you ADB experience, which will be useful for future applications. Think about also going for lower value contracts, including single source selection. To get these, it's really generally being on the radar of the decision makers, who tend to be the project officers. So it's worth getting to events like these once COVID's over. If there's in-person events where there's a particular session on your interest area, then try and go meet people. Try and know the country of the assignment. Good proposals tend to show insight into the local context of the project. If it's permissible, visit the site. Try and find out if there's any particular local conditions. This often is another sign of a good proposal. Try and be selective. This is not really a numbers game. If you send off 100 expressions of interest, there's no necessary reason to assume that you will win any of them, unless your proposal is strong and you have some sort of competitive advantage. It is very competitive here, so try and be selective and realistic. Also try and have a dedicated person who monitors CMS. Often the advertisements are not there for very long, and if it takes you a couple of weeks to notice an advertisement, you may limit your chances of preparing a good proposal on time. Next slide, please, Apple. So also it's important to follow any instructions in the request for proposal, or you could be non-compliant. Use any templates that are given. Study the terms of reference. Don't just repeat back. It's a sign of a poor proposal where large chunks of text are just simply repeated back from the terms of reference. And similarly, don't just copy and paste proposals from one to the next. We often see proposals where it's clearly been lifted from another project, where the names of the other project hasn't been changed, for instance, which obviously creates a very poor impression. There's also a lot to be learned from the evaluation criteria. So read those carefully, see if there's any particular types of criteria which attract a high mark, which indicates that we consider them important. In my experience, generally speaking, the team leader attracts a lot of interest because the important. This is a development bank, so we're interested in capacity building as part of the procurement process. And obviously local partners also have local understanding, which is very valuable to the projects. Next slide, please. Be careful to declare any conflict of interest or potential conflict, such as involvement in other phases of a project. This can be grounds for dismissals for non-compliance, so please make sure that you treat this very seriously. Eligibility also needs to be monitored carefully. Generally speaking, firms must be from ADB member countries, but there can be more flexibility in terms of individuals. So please just pay attention to whatever the wording stated in the RFP is. Also be careful with timing. We often get requests at the very last minute asking for extensions, which we don't generally give. We don't normally accept technical issues on the consultant's part as a reason for a late proposal. Of course, if it's to do with our systems, then we may consider it. So you should test things like browser compatibility and things like that early on. Next slide, please. So no talk these days is complete without mentioning COVID. We issued advice on COVID back in 2020. This remains good, although it was updated slightly recently. We've attempted to always put the safety of the consultants as of paramount importance. So we've shown flexibility in terms of restructuring projects so that travel isn't necessary. And we've also been accommodating in terms of paying extra expenses for consultants which have arisen because of COVID. Obviously, this is a fast-moving topic. Numbers of vaccinations are going up. The rates are different in different countries. Levels of infection are different in different countries. So we will continue to monitor it closely and decide when returning to some sort of level of business travel is permitted. Next slide, please. And for any of you actually interested specifically in COVID opportunities, you can find this on our website. You can do a search, particularly if you're interested in that type of sector. So that's the end of my presentation. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Galia, who will talk to you about CMS. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, possibly even good night for some of the people who are joining us around the world. My name is Galia Ismakova, and I'm Principal Procurement Specialist with Asian Development Bank. I will be talking today about CMS, Consultant Management System, and its main features. So I will be controlling my own presentation. Let me just do this right now. Right. Okay. So why you need to know about consultant management system? Because practically you would not be able to be an ADB consultant or even a resource person if you are unable to use the system. The scope of the consultant management system and the coverage of the system will be covered in this presentation. I will actually be telling you about individual consultants through firms or organizations, and I did answer some of the questions in Q&A chat already. And also, how does consulting firms and organizations that provide consulting services, however, they do not consider themselves to be consultants, such as NGOs, universities, or research institutions, can use CMS. So, ADB Consultant Management System is designed to facilitate ADB-funded consulting services recruitment. What does it mean? It actually means that we are normally funding or administering consulting services recruitment under technical assistance or staff consulting engagement, and this is normally covered through ADB administered consulting services where ADB is a client, and ADB funded or borrower or grant recipient administered consulting services where borrower or grant recipient is a client. The coverage of those is under the loans and grants. So what do you need to know if the ADB administered consulting services are contracted out or advertised in CMS? ADB staff consultants who are actually funded through internal administrative budget. So as the internal administrative budget system, advertisement, shortlistings, RFPs for firms, non-committal inquiries for individuals, ranking, contract negotiations, contract administration, such as payment requests, claims, variations and termination, and performance management are all covered in this particular system, which means it's practically from cradle to grave. From the time when we just decided to think about this particular selection of consultants, whether the individuals or the firms, all the way until we actually evaluate how did they do, and including all the information relating to contract administration. With ADB technical assistance consultants, which are TA funding, including trust funds, the coverage is not so wide. So the administration is hybrid. Technical assistance claim portal is where you actually put your payment requests. And some of the variations to scope or extension of time or terminations of the contracts are actually not done through any particular system. However, CMS single sign-on or SSO is used to access technical assistance claims portal. In terms of client administration, and we have got some questions in the chat, ADB CMS actually only covers advertisements for consulting opportunities, CSRN, which facilitates shortlisting. From time to time, in very rare cases when the selections are delegated for recruitment, however, not for administration, by the borrowers to ADB, CMS can be used to advertise consulting services, shortlist, collect proposals, evaluate proposals, and rank the proposals and send these results to the clients, borrowers, or grant recipients, who then negotiate contracts offline and administer these contracts offline as well. So ADB Consultant Management System, those of you who actually tuned in today are likely to have actually been looking at this portal already. So main features of CMS is searching for information, which includes searching consulting opportunities, which are still at a stage of consulting services recruitment notices. There was one question in the chat asking, how do I get shortlisted for single source selection? For single source selection, as my colleague Stephen Gillard have mentioned, you actually need to have a unique selling proposition and your brand name. You need to have such a brand recognition that you are selected because you are so unique, and these are particular opportunities that are not advertised. We can also hop in on opportunities just viewing shortlisted firms. You can find out through this information, through the historic information, who might be your main competitors, who are doing well and who in terms of being shortlisted. And you can view awarded contracts to find out who out of these shortlisted firms actually gone all the way to getting a contract. So with regards to consulting services recruitment notices, also known as CSRN, you can slice and dice the information by whether you're looking for individuals or firm assignment, whether you are looking for assignments that are open to member countries only. And on the screenshot here, you can see that there are 160 of them. And non-member countries. From time to time, if the contract is co-financed with others, the universal procurement applies, but it is a reasonably rare event. You can double click on project and find out more about general information that gives you a background for a specific assignment. However, not every project can be hyperlinked. The projects that are staff consulting projects would not have the project information. And this is generally due to access to information policy by Asian Development Bank, the document that you may also find on our website, which specifically says that we need to disclose our project information, such as loans or technical assistance. However, we do not need, as is in the case here, the project, like you can see preparation of the Cambodia Sustainable Coastal and Marine Fisheries Project, which is considered to be a staff consultancy. The staff consultancy here is when the resources of staff are actually supplemented by consultants. So in the CSRN, we publish the information generally about the assignment. There was another question in the chat asking, do we actually state the selection method straight away? Yes, we do. The selection method is disclosed already at CSRN stage. We also disclose the terms of reference. We disclose our own cost estimates. Cost estimates is not an obligation to give you a contract at this amount. And this is actually very important for individual consultants who sometimes get shortlisted for the assignment and say, we know how much money you have, so give it all to me. So if you are in this kind of a situation, please understand that the maximum budget stipulated in the CSRN is a maximum budget for a very, 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 very qualified candidate who might be at a rank of Nobel laureate. Unless you are such, it is not guaranteed that you will get the maximum budget. The next main feature of CMS is an opportunity to express interest in the consulting opportunity, which is open to 3 types of situations. Individual consultants who are independent, individual consultants through firms who might be affiliated with other firms, or maybe they're full-time employees, and consulting firms and other organizations offering consulting services as a team of experts. So the other option, the other feature of CMS is responding to non-committal inquiry. Again, please pay attention to the words. Non-committal inquiry means that we are asking you if you may be available for the assignment, but we are not committing ourselves, non-committal, that we are actually going to give you this contract. So from time to time, non-committal inquiry will be sent to all consultants in the shortlist, not only to one who will be contracted. So individual consultants shortlisted for the assignment are asked to reconfirm if they are available. And we also ask you straight away how much you want to get paid. Again, asking you a question, how much you want to get paid, is not a guarantee that we will actually pay you this amount. So you would need to provide the evidence that you actually have been paid this much. This will contribute back to our internal benchmarking tool, which we also benchmark to other international financial institutions and major bilaterals. If you don't respond to the NCI, it means you are not interested. And again, advertised budget is not a guarantee. The other feature of CMS is the distribution of the RFPs and the RFP process. Shortlisted firms receive the link to the request for proposal, and unless you click that, yes, I am intending to submit the proposal, you would not be able to actually access the forms. You can change your mind. You can tell us, yes, I want to submit the proposals, but then you can change your mind and decide, okay, this proposal is actually not for me. All clarifications shall be sent through the CMS messaging. And if your clarification request is not confidential, it's not about specific person, it's not about specific situation in which your firm is, like, for example, inquiry about conflict of interest, the responses will be shared with everyone. If your clarification response is of confidential matter, then the response will be shared only with you. ADB has visibility of the process status, so we actually will know how many firms have started the process, how many firms downloaded the forms, how many of them started, but we have no visibility of what your proposal is until the deadline. Okay. So why I'm telling you, it is because from time to time, we actually receive the information that someone complains about CMS malfunctioning. However, we do have all the information about logins to the system, and we know if you actually attempted to submit the proposal in the last minute and then failed because of the lack of preparation. Consultants are notified on the status of evaluation, a technical and financial opening. You are given the summary, the total scores, and if for some reason, unfortunately, you didn't win, you will be able to get a debriefing. Negotiations are conducted online through CMS messaging and CMS attachments. Signed contracts are also stored electronically. It can be accessed by ADB and consultants themselves. And issued contracts trigger performance evaluation process at the end of the contract and so-called post-assignment questionnaire. Post-assignment questionnaire is a questionnaire that's sent to you as a consultant to tell us how did we do. So it is an important part of ADB governance process because we need to sometimes calibrate what do you think about us and not just what we think about you. So sometimes if there will be some kind of a dispute with regards to your performance evaluation, like if it is unsatisfactory, we might need to actually look at your post-assignment questionnaire and also look at your response to the notice to figure out whether we are at fault ourselves. Okay, CMS main feature for contract administration is available only for staff consulting engagements, and it gives you an opportunity for seamless contract administration from contract finalization to payment claims, advances, and variations. Visibility of consulting engagements available only for ADB administered assignments, which would show you the status of your expression of interest, status of your RFP, status of contract award, status of shortlisting, and contract award disclosure. If the assignment is borrower administered, the EOIs are actually given to the borrower. Again, there was a question in the chat about this. We are not actually in control of the borrowers, so we cannot force them to do it any quicker than they already do. Quite a lot of our borrowers have an internal bureaucracy. So each CSRM, which is ADB funded but not administered, has a contact person of the EA, and this contact person needs to be contacted to figure out the status of the assignment. Okay, so in terms of shortlisted firms, we have the information on ongoing requests for proposals, those so-called hop-on opportunities where you can actually get on this moving train and be in time for the destination. And we also give the information on all selections. All selections means it's historic information. Okay, in terms of awarded contracts, obviously, this for very long-term assignments, this again can create an hop-on opportunities because people do move on, especially in 3-4 year engagement. or sometimes they even die, or something happens. So you might actually be in a position of being a substitute team member in some of the contracts. You also can look at who gets the contract with ADB to maybe try to figure out whether you can partner with these successful organizations. We have a lot of information about how to use CMS. Okay, I actually feel very attached to the system because the system was actually launched in 2008. And 2008 was a very, very important year for me. I gave birth to triplets and gave birth to CMS. So I was actually involved from the very beginning. And but I also understand that this is not as easy to use system as Amazon.com, and that's probably why I'm not Jeff Bezos. But we try to make sure that people still are able to use the system. Okay, so we have the information for consulting firms and for individuals. And for other information, I invite you to check adb.org and Business Center of ADB, and also some of the blogs on winning consultancy projects. If you are not yet at LinkedIn, it's a good opportunity to actually connect to firms and individuals. And we have ADB Consultants, a group on LinkedIn, where some of the consultants are trying to actually find other partners to participate in tenders. So on this, I'm finishing my presentation, and I'm introducing to you my colleague from Information Technology Department, Karl Mark Lomibau. We have been working together for very, very long time. And normally I do not give him an opportunity to conduct his presentation by himself, jump in and give him some of my ideas as well, why certain things are there. So I will actually now give an opportunity to Karl to speak. I'll mute myself and will try to jump in only when absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Kalia. So welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Carlo Milo. I'm one of the trainers that handles CMS for, I think, ever since the beginning, right, Kalia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ever since the beginning.
Yeah. I was there when it wasn't even released. We were there during the time that it was being developed. So again, welcome everyone. Next slide, please. So I'll give you an overview. I'll show you the CMS login screen, the consultant profile, the consulting services, the request for proposals, and other materials that we have prepared for you. So I will show you some of the screens and how you can fill this up. We won't go through each field, okay, what you have to enter on those fields, but I will just give you some idea on what is required for you to fill up, okay? So next slide, please. So how can you now navigate the login screen? Next slide. So at the top, you have your navigation pane where you have your home, consulting opportunities, your shortlisted firms. This was what was discussed earlier, right? So this is where you get all that information. At the middle part of that screen, you have your login button. You can click on consultant/EA. That's what you have to click on if you want to log into CMS. If you don't have a profile in CMS, you click on register. That's what you fill up when you will be registering in ADB. And you have at the bottom your advisory. This is very important. There are times that there's going to be a time where the system won't be available. So you have to know when it would be. Okay. This would change from time to time. Okay. Now moving on, please go to the next slide. So if you click on the login button, you will be required to fill in the username and your password. Okay. Now, if in case you forgot your password. This is very important. We get a lot of questions, or we have gotten a lot of emails and calls from consultants around the world where they forgot their password. Okay, instead of calling, you can click on that forgot your password button, and then just fill in your username that you have entered when you are registering for CMS, and then CMS will send an email back to that email, and then you can proceed with the instructions in that email. Next slide, please. Okay, just like what was mentioned earlier, your consulting opportunities, or your CSRN. Now, make sure that you use the filters. Okay, we have a lot of opportunities, and it's based on regions and different sectors and subsectors. Okay, it's important for you to use your filters so that you will know the with the filters on with these filters, you will see all the opportunities that is useful and will connect with your expertise instead of going through all the list of opportunities. Okay, so make sure you use your search filters. Next slide, please. Again, just like what was mentioned earlier, look at the shortlisted firms. Okay, you go on top of that screen and there's a link there. You can look at those shortlisted firms. Moving on to the next slide. And you also have your awarded contracts. Okay, so I won't be discussing these items anymore because it was already discussed earlier. Okay, next slide, please. At the right side of that link, you have your online guides. This is the consultant tutor. Okay, you can actually go to this page by typing in the URL consultanttutor.adb.org, and you'll be led to the same screen. Okay, and as what was mentioned earlier, we have different guides for consulting firms and individual consultants. That's it's available here. We also have prepared videos. So if in case you want to see the videos, you can look at those videos here. Next slide, please. Now, let's go to the consultant registration. Okay, so again, click on register here at the CMS website. Next slide, please. And you will be led to this screen where you have two options. If you're an individual consultant, click on individual consultants, and firms, you go to the middle part. Okay, next slide, please. So if you want to register, make sure you remember this. Okay, take note of all required fields. They are marked with asterisks. Okay, if it does not have that asterisk, you can move on and just leave it blank for now and just fill it up later. Okay, ensure that the information are ready at hand before starting your registration process. Okay, and then complete the registration within 15 minutes to avoid getting kicked out of the system, because we have that 15-minute timeline where if in case you don't click on submit or save during the process during your registration time, CMS will actually kick you out of the system. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now I'll give you some tips here. Okay, so first of all, when you're now registering, you have to fill in your basic information. Okay, put in your firm's name, your overall narrative description of what your business is. There's also something similar to individual consultants. Now, if in case you want to make sure that you will be able to register, okay, you can type in under overall narrative description. Okay, just type their test. Type in some very common terms or words. Okay, we usually for training we usually type in test, TEST. Okay, so that later on you can just register and just fill this up later when you will be completing your profile. Okay, so that's one of the tips that I can give you. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So your important information, where is your country registered in, years of incorporation, and so on. So you have to fill up these fields. Okay, it's very important. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Okay, for the address details, put in your country, your street address, telephone number, and city. Those are the most important things here. Those are the things that has that asterisk. You can leave the other fields blank for now while you are registering. Okay, you can fill this up later. For user account details, make sure you enter your email address that you want to register in, and make sure that you remember this. Okay, Otherwise, if you've forgotten this email, or if in case you lost that email address, it might be difficult for you to get access to your account. And I think there are some consultants firms who actually created new profiles because they forgot their email address. Okay, so make sure that you take note of that email address. Click on continue, and then you can now move on to the next screen where you can attach your documents. Okay, what are these documents? It can be your certificate of incorporation and so on. So you can just attach it in this screen by clicking on add attachment. Okay, next slide, please. So registration comments, it's not really important, but it's important for you to click on certification. Okay, that's very important. Put in your name, your position in the organization, and then click on next. That means after doing that, you are now registered. Okay. Now, what's important after you register is you complete your profile information. You can select information to be highlighted in your expressions of interest. What does that mean? Okay. If you complete your registration, you put in your experiences. This is also important if you are in an individual or a firm. Okay. If you will be submitting an EOI, you can't type that information anymore. Let's say I have experience working for company X, company Y, and company Z. Okay. If I put that in my profile, I can just select it when I will be submitting my EOI. I don't have to fill that in when I'll be submitting my EOI one at a time. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, your CMS profile can be used as your CV or your company profile. Okay, this is important if in case we have a facility for ADB staff to actually search for consultants. Okay, so if that's if ADB would like to know who are available in the database, they can search for your names through that search functionality. Let's say they want to look at renewable expertise in the Pacific. So if that's the case, they can search for that type of expertise, and then your name will be put as part of that list. Okay, so make sure that you put that information inside your profile. And also, moving on, this is now your profile tab. So how can you now access this? You log into CMS, you have that profile button on top, that's your profile tab. And then you have there under consulting entity details, that's what you have to fill up. Okay, so and as I mentioned earlier, overall description of the firm, that's actually available for you to fill up later, right? When you put in test during the beginning, you can just fill in the form later on. Next slide, please. Now, this is now what's important. There's an affiliation module inside CMS. This is where your firm can affiliate with an individual consultant, or the individual can affiliate with a firm, or both firms can affiliate with each other. And this was discussed earlier by Galia. I'll just show you how it would be done right now. Okay. So firm affiliation with an individual consultant, why is this necessary? It's for processing individuals through a firm contract. Okay. Let's say I'm a firm. I have logged into CMS, and I have at the bottom, I have key experts. So when I click on that key experts link at the bottom, I'll be led to this screen, and I have add key experts. I click on that button. Next slide, please. This is where I have to fill this information up. So I have to put in the CMS number of that individual consultant. It's very important for you to know this, because this is actually how CMS will know if you actually have talked with that individual consultant. Okay, so that CMS number will come from your individual consultant. They'll give you that name. What is their registered last name and first name inside the system? What is their country of birth? And if it's going to be a full-time expert or not. Now click on OK. And then CMS will send an email to this individual consultant, and then that consultant will log into CMS. And go to the next slide, please. Now this is now the individual consultant who has logged in. Okay. Now that consultant will click on Go to Task. Next slide, please. And this is where the consultant can respond to that request. So the affiliation status, whether it's confirmed or not. Okay. And another thing for individual consultants, you have that option to allow the company to view your profile. Okay. You have that option. You can select yes or no. Okay. And then when you click on OK, then you can now be affiliated with that firm. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, how can an individual consultant start that process himself or herself with a firm? Okay. So for an individual consultant, it's under the consultant details. Under consultant details, you have at the bottom of that screen, add company affiliation. So when you click on that button, please go to the next slide. This is how it would appear. So is the firm registered in CMS? Yes or no? What's the CMS number of that firm? What's the firm's name? And so on. Okay. And also, you, as an individual consultant, you have the option to allow your company or this company to view your profile. Okay. Now click on OK, and then CMS will send an email to that firm, and then they can also respond inside CMS. Go to the next slide, please. So this is now the firm who has logged in. This is where he or she can click on the Go to Task button. Now, go to the next slide, please. And then this is where that firm can respond if that affiliation is confirmed or declined. Okay, so click on OK if you are the firm, and then the affiliation will be available now. Okay, now go to the next slide, please. What if a firm will respond, will be affiliated with another firm? Okay, so again, it's under consulting entity details for firms. Okay, I'm logged in as a firm. I have add affiliate organizations at the bottom of that screen. Next slide, please. And then I make sure that I know this information from my firm, from my other firm who I want to affiliate with. Put in the CMS number, the firm's organization's name, and the country of incorporation. Click on OK, and then the other firm will receive an email from CMS. Go to the next slide, please. They log in and they click on Go to Task. Okay, next slide. They respond the same way as an individual consultant or the other firm. If they would like to confirm or decline that affiliation, and click on OK. Next slide, please. So that's how you can affiliate with a firm or an individual through CMS. Now, payment information. Now, this is another thing that has been what we get calls or emails based on the number of issues that consultants would have when they're putting in their payment information. Now, the payment information is important if in case you are part of a negotiation. Okay, during the beginning of your registration, payment information is a required field. Okay, it's not really required for you to put in your payment information. It's important if in case you will be part of a negotiation with ADB. Okay, so you go to your payment information. This is the same for an individual consultant or a firm. So you have there a button that says Add Payment Information. Next slide, please. So you put in your contract currency and your account number and account holder's name. Now, it's important for you to put in your contract currency if it's a USD, a PHP, or whatever currency that can be forwarded to that bank account. Okay, next slide, please. and then make sure that you select the country where that bank is going to be located. Okay. At the bottom of that screen, you also have your Find Your Bank button. What does that mean? Okay. As you can see, there's no way for you to fill in the bank's name. Okay. So when you click on Find Your Bank, next slide, please. CMS actually has a list of bank accounts, okay, in their database. So you fill that information in, the branch address and so on, and then you can just click on Quick Select and select that that bank. Okay. Next slide, please. And as you can see, the rest of the fields will be automatically generated for you, with the exception of some of the fields that's going to be important. And as you can see, Swift BIC/BEI is what's available for you to fill up. But there are some banks that will have different requirements. So the fields will be dependent on the bank and where it's located in. Okay, and that field will adjust based on that requirement. Now, if in case the bank that you want to select is not available inside the database, click on No and then fill the information on the bank's information on the available fields. Okay. Another important part of this screen is your intermediary bank details. Now, why is this now important, or what can you now fill this up with? Okay, so this is where, in case you have a bank, let's say it's a USD bank account, but it's not located in the US. Okay, there are some banks that would require you to have intermediary banks to make sure that from ADB, it can transfer that payment to another bank and it would be forwarded to your bank. Okay, so there's an intermediary part of that process. Okay, if you did not put any information here, there might be a chance that your ADB can forward that payment, and it would go to Bank A, Bank B, Bank C, and it would go to your bank. Okay, so we need to know how
practically everyone will get a cut before you get your money.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to mention. Okay, so trying to make sure that you have that you limit that that process. You have to fill in this intermediary bank information. Okay, and then if in case you want to know what this bank information is, you don't ask your bank teller. You don't ask the person who is handling your new accounts. You ask for the person who handles cross-border transactions inside that branch. Okay, make sure that you do that, and then that person will tell you, oh, this is the bank that we use when we are doing cross-border transactions. Okay, make sure that you remember that. Click on next. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, sorry. Can you go back? Back one slide, please. Okay. So why do you need it? It's to avoid unapplied payments. Okay. What does it mean for unapplied payments? ADB will send the payment to your bank, but your bank did not receive the payment. It would go back to ADB. So there's going to be a delay in that payment. Okay. And we don't want to have that because there are some consultants or some firms who have their own bills, and it's going to be such a hassle if the payment will be delayed. So make sure that you get that information. And also, just like what Galia mentioned earlier, it's to avoid those cuts. Okay, so avoid unnecessary transaction fees, because if in case your payment will go from ADB to Bank A, Bank B, Bank C, for each of those banks, there will be transaction fees. Okay, so make sure that you address that by talking to your bank representative who handles cross-border transactions. Next slide, please. Okay, at the bottom, you can put in your attachments. This can be certificates that would tell ADB that you really own this payment information or this bank account. Okay. Also, you also have the option to put in a comments, and you click on submit. Then ADB will be verifying if your payment information is correct, okay, or it's not really correct. If it's your name, that's your name is actually part of that payment information, and it can now be used as how ADB can send your payments online. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, consulting opportunities, how to find them. There are actually 4 ways to look at CSRN or your consulting opportunities. First is at CMS. So anyone can access this. Okay. There's also csrn.adb.org. And then if you are registered in CMS, you can search for it inside CMS. And you have your weekly CSRN email notification. It's actually sent, I think, from Saturdays to Sunday. Originally, it was just from Sundays. Now, there's so many consultants who are registered. You have to spend 2 days to send this email notification. Okay. So again, this email notification will be sent out to actively registered consultants. I have to mention that or reiterate that, actively registered consultants. What does this mean? You have to make sure that you update your registration on a yearly basis. Okay. If in case you do not update your registration, after 12 months, your registration will be deactivated. And for you to activate it again, you have to go back to CMS and then fill in anything inside your profile and then submit, and then your profile will be activated the next day. Okay, next slide, please. So this is how you can search for opportunities under csrn.adb.org. Again, use your search filters. Okay, click on next. Again, just like what was mentioned earlier, you click on the links at the left to look at the project data. Okay, it's going to lead you to adb.org, and it will show you the information on that project. However, if you want to submit your EOI, or not your EOI, you can click on View CSRN. Okay, that's the icon at the left. So you click on View CSRN, and this is where you can look at the opportunities. Okay, so click on next. So this is where you can look at, sorry, I think you missed out on something. Can you scroll back? Okay, now if you are in cms.adb.org, you have at a bottom or a link on top that says consulting opportunities. Okay, and again, this would lead you to CSRN. Okay, now if you are logged into CMS, you will have there a tab on top that says opportunities. So if you go to the opportunities page, you'll have the same fields at the bottom. We have different filters. Okay, and then just click on go, and then you'll have the results at the bottom. Okay. And of course, you have your CSRN weekly notification. So this is going to be sent out every weekend, and then you'll see the opportunities that's available for you when the deadline is. And if in case you want to look at that opportunity, you click on the link on that email. Next slide, please. Okay, if you want to view the CSRN, this will give you the important information about that opportunity. You have your profile, your terms of reference, and cost estimates. Okay. And then if you want to submit an EOI, you click on Express Interest. Next slide, please. So when you click on Express Interest, these are now the screens that you have to fill up. Okay. So can you click on Next? So you have to fill up that information. And then if you want to put in a project that you have been engaged in as part of your expressions of interest, click on Add Project. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. Next slide, please. This is where you will see the list of the projects that you have been involved in that you have entered in your profile. Okay, so this is where you can highlight these opportunities, okay, by clicking on the details icon to see what you have entered on that experience or project. Next slide, please. And then this is where you can see the see the information on that project details. Click on close. And then put a tick mark on the opportunities that that you have been engaged in, and click on select. Okay, you can select as many projects that you want to include as part of your expressions of interest. Next slide, please. So if you want to add an expert, you can do so by clicking on Add Expert. And then click on EOI attachments if you have documents that you want to attach as part of your expressions of interest. Click on Next. Now, this is very important. There are some attachment screens that you will be encountering inside CMS. Make sure in the category icon or the category drop-down list, you make sure that you select the category, the correct category, when you will be uploading your document. Choose a file and then click on Apply, then that document will be uploaded. Next slide, please. So make sure that you read your eligibility declaration. Okay, make sure that you read it and then review it and then tick accordingly. Okay, and then click on Submit, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, click on Submit. Next slide, please. Okay, and then that would make sure that your EOI has been submitted. You can also reuse a similar EOI that you have submitted previously. So if you want to reuse a similar EOI, you have that button. Click Next. Sorry, next slide, please. Search for that EOI and then click on Yes. And that would overwrite your existing EOI, and then you still have the option to update it based on the requirements of the CSRN. Next slide, please. We also get a lot of questions about this, how to check the status of your EOI. It's actually part of your Opportunities tab. You have there under Remarks, you have the option to see what is now the status of your EOI, if you have been shortlisted or have you not been shortlisted. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I don't have any more time. Stefan?
Yes, thank you very much, Carl. Yeah, it's really very interesting, and of course, I'm sure a lot of people are really keen for this very important information. But we committed to have few minutes to have some exchange with the audience. It's also part of this session. Thank you very much, Carl. So I saw there was a lot of questions in the Q&A. So thank you very much for this. And the team already did a great job answering many of them. But we really want to invite you, if there are any questions that have not been addressed yet or that is not clear, please use the chat box and send us this question, and we'll be happy to answer it live now. So we want to hear from you. In the meantime, Julian, maybe do you want to raise any specific topic that was maybe a key focus of the participant questions? Do you want to make any comments on the question you received so far?
Thanks, Stefan. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, we've had a lot of good questions through the chat window. So if there are a few more there that we can jump on in a minute. But I think that some key themes that I was hearing, and Galia might be able to add as well. Questions related to the EOI process, quite a few, is our CVs required? What are the qualification criteria used, differences between EOIs for firms and individuals, debriefing, when is it offered to individuals and firms? So Zoom to see our answers to some of those key questions that came several times.
Hi, Julian.
And react all of these answers after. Yes, Galia.
Okay, so it looks like there is a confusion because quite a few people ask the question, and there is currently the question about whether they need to attach CVs of the experts at CMS at the EOI stage. So I did answer this question before. However, because it's kind of a recurrent question, quite a few people are asking the same question. So if you're applying for individual assignment, obviously you need to actually attach the CV, because the selection is for individual, whether it is an independent individual or an individual through a firm. So it's important what qualification and experience this individual brings to the table. There is one more example when we actually ask you to provide CVs, and this is for consultant qualification selection. Consultant qualification selection is when practically shortlisting is limited to 3 companies, but RFP is issued to only 1. So you need to be the best to actually get the RFP request. And at this stage, we do request you to provide the CVs of the key personnel. Okay, so then obviously, if you do not provide the CVs when you are specifically asked for them, you have lower chance of being shortlisted. So I hope I did answer this question. Now, with regards, there was quite a lot of questions with regards to contract information. And one of the questions was that under staff consultancies, ADB actually automatically records contract information in CMS profile for the individuals. However, this information is not recorded when the type of contract is technical assistance or resource person or an expert in the firm. You have an ability to actually enter this information manually if it is not generated by the system. And if you remember my presentation, I actually did say that for staff consultancy assignments, it's cradle to grave system. It records all important transactions. However, because the contract administration for TAs does happen outside the system, we are not able to capture this information. So hopefully this answers the question as well.
Thank you very much, Galia. I see two participants who have their hands raised, Leslie and Nasser. So I don't know if we can give you the possibility to speak or not. But if not, can you please ask your question in the chat box?
Stefan, I see the question from Naveen Kumar. Naveen has been a champion today. He asked probably 50 questions already. But his latest question is, how many projects do we need to slice for submission in EOI? The answer to this question is that you need to submit the EOIs that are relevant to the assignment. Okay, there is no point of, I actually have got as a question previously when a consulting company complains that they cannot enter more than 300 projects. And I ask them a question, who will be actually reading the information about your 300 projects? So you actually need to be selective on what you want to showcase as the most relevant assignment. So it is in some ways ability to present your experience in the best possible light. So what we are looking for, read the TOR, check your experience, check your qualifications, and find out which one have more kind of hits in terms of being fit for the purpose. And some of the EOIs actually specifically ask for a certain number of projects. It says, please provide no more than 10. So this is where you need to get selective.
Thank you, Galia. Galia, I see a question from Mark O'Grady. Maybe it's a question from Steve, an interesting question. Is it a problem, is it an issue if the same local consultants are mentioned or used in two different competitive bidders teams? So
it is not a problem.
Can it be the case?
It is not a problem unless this person is a full-time employee of one of the firms. If the person is full-time employee of one of the firms and is also present in another proposal, then it creates a conflict of interest. However, if the person is an independent consultant, he or she may be present in more than one proposal. Sometimes I have seen 5 out of 6 proposals offering the same expert, being the expert in the field, okay? And sometimes you might actually have the situation when the same person is evaluated differently. And the answer why the person would be evaluated differently is because we were provided a completely different set of information for the same person. One firm actually did manage to customize the CV to showcase the most relevant experience and qualifications, and another dumped on us all kinds of information that might be, for example, outdated.
Thank you, Galia. Very clear. Maybe a question, last question, because I see the time is running. I saw there was some question in the chat box related. How can bidders interact with project officer? Can they ask questions during the submission time or after the submission time on the debriefing? So maybe Steve, do you want to come back on that? What are the rules for bidders or potential interested bidders to ask information to ADB project officers?
Sure. Well, I mean, the general principle, we got quite a few questions in the chat about what's acceptable during the CSRN, the procurement notice stage. So we don't really have formal channels for that stage. But generally speaking, the correct approach is to do it in writing. So send an email to the project officer. And if the project officer realizes that there is information that would generally clarify equally, because it's not appropriate for the project officer to have side discussions with a consultant during an ongoing process, because you know, that they could give unfair advantage to one of the firms, or even open the door for perhaps corruption or even just appearance of corruption. So everything should be through writing. If there's actually a proper RFP process, then there's a request for clarifications phase, which has a deadline date. So all consultants should submit their requests for clarification or the EA, because this could threaten the integrity of the process. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks to all. So I see there are still many questions, but in the interest of time or to respect the schedule, we'll have to close in few seconds. I want really to give few concluding remarks. First, to thank the audience for your very active participation. I see we still have about 300 people connected, so it really gives us some confidence on the importance of this session for ADB to communicate with you, the market, providing at the end of the day implementing our project, and you are really the one that we need to have a successful project. So please continue to attend these sessions to understand how to better win opportunities and market within ADB. So we have really a plan this year to extend this session and to have more in the coming weeks. So I really invite you to look at the internet website of ADB, and we'll communicate about the coming session on how to better address and prepare bidding documents, offers to participate in ADB opportunities. A few practical information. So we will give you in a few minutes, we'll send a survey link to all the participants of today's events. So we really thank you in advance to answer to this survey, because it really helps us to improve the quality of these events. And also, we really want to emphasize, as it was explained by the participant today, that we are really looking for innovation or ideas to better implement our ADB strategy 2030. You can have a look to this strategy if you don't know it well on ADB website, and really innovation and new ideas, new technology is really key words for this strategy. So you are really invited to participate with us to the success of this strategy. I really would like to close this session by thanking all the high-level participants from ADB, and they are really making the success of this session. So thank you very much, and please continue, all of you, to exchange with us, to ask questions. We will answer all the questions, and we will publish these questions on the website also, together with all the content and the presentation of today's session. So please stay connected with us, and we look forward to exchange with you soon. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.